The film opens with a boy named Zane being examined by a physician in an office. The doctor tells someone just out of view that he was probably around 12 to 13 years old. We cut to a scene with several women lined up against a wall as an officer processes a group of migrant workers. Among them is an Ethiopian woman named Tigist Alio. Fast forward to real time, we see Zane being cuffed and taken away by uniformed officers from his cell. Meanwhile, in the same prison but somewhere else, Tigist Alio is also taken away. The two are taken to a courtroom where just a few feet away are Zane's parents, Selim and Soad. Soad is agitated, saying that her son was supposed to serve his sentence in prison, but they're dragged there by him.
Mom.
Her husband echoes her frustration, and Zane's mother calls this act childish. The judge points out that her son has been sentenced to 5 years in prison just before asking how old he is for that grave offense to be called childish. Zane's lawyer reveals that he has never been registered and that his parents do not know his exact date of birth. She then hands over a file from the medical examiner to the judge, which certifies, however, that Zane was about 12 years old at the time of the incident. When the judge asks Zane about why he was serving a prison sentence, Zane tells him it's because he stabbed someone. When he asks why he was there filing a complaint against his parents, Zane simply says he's suing them for letting him be born. Months before this court hearing, we see Zane in a flashback buying pills with a forged prescription to help in the family business of making drugs. When he gets home, his mother and sibling crush up the pills as Zane himself pours water into a basin. After the pills have been crushed into a fine powder, they carefully pour it into the water and mix it well before soaking a bunch of clothes in it. They let them dry. And after a while later, we see them visit the prison for Ibrahim, Zane's brother, who sells those to the drug addicts inside the prison. After this, we see Zane helping out at a local store just as a van carrying school children drives by and drops off a kid his age. He takes his payment from the store owner, Assad, and a little gift, licorice and ramen, for his sister, Sahar, before heading off with his trolley. When he gets far enough, he takes the licorice and ramen and angrily throws it away. At the rundown home, Sahar asks about the licorice and ramen, but Zane doesn't respond. The next morning, as his siblings wake him to prepare for the day, he rolls over and sees a blood stain on the sheets where Sahar lay last night. Later that day, as the kids sell veggies on the street, he notices blood on Sahar's pants and takes her home and washes her underwear in an attempt to hide it. He reminds her of her friend Alia, who was locked up after her mother found out, until one day a big pig came to fetch her. He warns her that their mother wouldn't want her anymore and she'll be tossed to the street or worse, given to Assad. After explaining the dangers of people finding out about her first period, the two head over to Assad's store. While Sahar talks to him, Zane takes the time to shoplift feminine pads. Later that night, the family has dinner in their cramped house. Their father dismisses Zane's notion of signing up for school as he wants him to keep working for Assad. But their mother reasons out that school might send them food or even clothes, while Zane learns 1 or 3 words. Still, his dad's pretty much preoccupied with the whole employment thing and asks Zane what Assad says, and Zane says he'll talk to him. He'll study during the day, and in the afternoon, he'll come home to work. Soon after, though, we still see Zane doing heavy work for Assad. After a long day at work, he comes home to find chickens running around. One of his siblings tells him that Assad was there, and he takes a peek into the living room. There, he sees Assad and his father, and Sahar all made up. Furious, he goes to his mother and asks what was going on. He threatens that he's going to kick them out as soon as they finish the juice that Suad is making for them, and Suad tries scolding him, saying that Assad, who's also their landlord, is going to throw them out if he does. Suad continues entertaining their guests and asks Sahar to take her baby sister to the other room. Sahar picks her up and carries her to where Zane is. Zane tries to wipe off her lipstick and tells her that she looks like a witch in her dress before trying to fight off tears. Meanwhile, in the other room, after the guests have left, we see the parents looking defeated, and so does Zane. Early morning the following day, while the rest of the family's asleep, Zane packs up Sahar's clothes and tells her that he's taking her somewhere. He tells her to wait a bit as he goes out to prepare everything. However, when he gets back home, he sees Sahar begging their mother not to make her leave as Suad tries to drag her out of the house. Zain tries his best to stop her, but Suad beats him just before Selim intervenes and carries Sahar outside. With the help of Suad, the two place Sahar on the scooter and drive away as Zain chases after them. Their mother tells him to let her go, and he curses her before running away. Then, we jump into the present, back in the courtroom with Zain and his parents. With tears streaming down his face, Selim insists that he told himself that if Assad married her, at least she would sleep on a real bed with a blanket. She could eat as much as she liked. She could watch TV. With him, he thought she was doomed. The judge asks if he ever thought that it would come to that point. Selim said that he never wanted any of that. He didn't want Zain to stab someone and complains that if he had a choice, he would be better than all of them in that court. Now, people were spitting on him in the streets. People treat him like an animal. He claims that his children ruined his life. Back in the past, we see Zain riding the bus. An old man wearing a faded knockoff Spider-Man costume enters and sits down next to Zain, who stares at him, fascinated. The old man tells him that he's not the superhero he thinks he is. And Zain argues that it should be a spider on his chest, but the guy just says that he's Cockroach Man, Spider-Man's cousin. The two make small talk just before Cockroach Man gets off the bus to head to a theme park. Zain gets off too, and he spends the night in the carnival. He later goes around and catches the attention of Tigest Alio, the migrant worker from earlier who was working as a cleaner there. Zain eventually finds her in the cafeteria and asks if the owner was there. The lady gives him food and drink, and as he's eating, she asks why he needs the owner. Zain says he's going to ask for a job, any job. A bit later, we see Zain talking to a chef behind the counter, offering his services, but the man declines. He goes around the neighborhood asking random people if they need help with any work at all, but no takers. Later that night, a hungry Zain goes back to the carnival and watches the people enjoy the rides. From afar, Tigest watches him too. Later, in the bathroom, we see her taking a break and trying to hide her baby in one of the stalls. As she goes home, Zain follows behind and begs her for anything to eat. She looks at him for a moment before deciding to take him home. There, she bathes him along with her son before giving him dinner and a bed to sleep on. The next morning, Tigest pumps some milk and instructs Zain when to feed her son. As Zain takes care of the baby, she's busy putting on makeup to look like the person in her ID. At work, she tells her coworker that she needs to renew her papers because they're expiring soon, but she doesn't have the money for it at all. Her coworker warns her that lots of girls get arrested, even in the middle of the night. Before she leaves, she manages to sneak out a partially eaten cake from the restaurant that was supposed to be thrown out. She sticks a tiny candle on it and has a little party for Jonas. As Zain eats cake, Tigest asks him about his family. He tells her that he has many brothers and sisters, but he misses Sahar the most. When Tigest asks where his sister was, he tells her that she's with her husband and lies about how happy that came to be. He tells her there was a street party where people threw rice and flowers. He didn't tell her that Sahar was basically sold. After this, we jump back to the present. Tigest is speaking in court now, or rather, Rahil Arisa. She's an illegal immigrant imprisoned for not having a residence permit. She worked for a lady for 6 years and thought she was kind. Rahil fell in love, got pregnant, and left because she was afraid the police would take her baby away from her. The judge then asks about the times that Rahil left Jonas with Zain. Rahil explains that though she was nervous the first 2 days, she eventually warmed up and trusted him. The judge then asks if she expected that Zain would do what he did. Rahil says no. But she doesn't blame him because she knew Aspro, the man who forged her papers. In another flashback, we see Rahil talking to Aspro in his store about getting her papers done. Rahil tries to haggle with him, complaining about the whopping $1,500 she has to pay to get the work done. But Aspro was having none of that. He instead reminds her of a way she could save $1,500 and still get her papers. All she has to do is give him Jonas. He tells her that her son is living like a fugitive, but Rahil brushes him off, and with that, Aspro strikes a deal. He gives her his services for $1,200 this time, and she comes back with her son. She has 7 days to either give up Jonas or find money to pay for her forged papers. Rahil then spends the entire day looking for a way to get an advance in her payment, but no luck. Later that night, she meets with her former lover, who hands her the ID of her former madam. Later that night, Zane wakes up from a nap and Rahil still wasn't home. The next day, with Rahil still nowhere to be seen, he puts on a jacket on little Jonas and the two hop on a bus to head over to where she works. There, one of her coworkers tells him that he hasn't seen her in 2 days and that she's probably over at Aspro's if she said that she would head over to Souk. The two then walk to Souk Al Ahad to find Aspro's booth, but he hasn't seen Rahil either and her cell phone is off when he tries calling her. He buys the two falafels and a small bottle of Pepsi that the two eat by the curb. When Zane finishes, he asks a girl to open the Pepsi for him and she does. She sits next to the two and asks for their names. Zane lies and tells her his name was Ibrahim and that Jonas was Assad. She introduces herself as Maysoon and asks if he stole Assad, and uses him to beg. Zane declines and said he's his brother. As the two kids spend the night on the streets, we see Rahil, along with other undocumented workers, being cuffed and taken to prison. There, the other ladies tell her to hide the fact that she has a son. And later that night, she squeezes all of the milk from her breasts in an effort to hide Jonas. The following day, Zane and a starving Jonas hop on a bus and head back to Rahil's shack. Zane struggles to find something to feed the baby, even going as far as stealing a bottle from their neighbor's kid. In their broken down fridge, he finds ice cubes and places them in a bowl with some sugar, which the two of them suck on. As the days pass, Zane finds it harder and harder to survive. When the house runs out of water, he steals a skateboard from their neighbor and uses it to haul little Jonas in some pots and pans with him. He heads back to Souk Al Ahad to sell the stuff and bumps into Maysoon. Zane asks her if she could take him to the place where she gets food relief because she tells him that they can't serve him there because he's Lebanese and she was Syrian. With that, he starts practicing his best Syrian accent, making up a whole backstory for the both of them, and manages to get them some food from the dispensary. When he gets home, he unloads the broken water tank in their home and goes to Aspro to sell it. He initially puts it up for $20,000, but Aspro buys it from him for $30,000. He asks if Rahil has gone back home already and Zane lies, saying that she went back after a while. Aspro then tells Zane that a family wants Jonas. They can feed him, dress him. Zane could even pocket some $500. Zane then asks Aspro if he arranges for people to travel to Turkey, and he asks if he could help him go there or to Sweden, whichever is nicer. Aspro says he could, but only if he could convince Rahil to give him the kid. Zane says that he'll try after Aspro hands him some money for the tank. After this, the two head over to a local car wash and ask the workers if they could get hosed down. The kind folks there help the kids out, even helping them wash their clothes. When the two get home, as Zane hangs their soaked clothes, he finds a folded up prescription in the pocket of one of his pants. Like old times, he makes up a story at the pharmacy to buy some pills. He crushes them and mixes them with seawater before putting them in big plastic bottles. Together with Jonas, he goes around dingy neighborhoods, selling swigs of drugs in juice form. Business goes all right for just a little while, but he starts getting roughed up by the people he sells the drugs to. When he gets home one night, he finds his stuff thrown out of their shack and the locks changed. Knowing that he has his money hidden inside the house, he tries banging the door open, but his neighbor interrupts and says she's going to call the cops on him. The two argue, but ultimately Zane isn't able to get inside and get his money back. With nowhere to go, Zane and Jonas sit by the streets. Zane, absolutely defeated, eventually breaks and heads to Souk. He gives Aspro the baby in exchange for a ticket out of Beirut and some cash. After Aspro reassures him that Jonas will go to a good family, Zane kisses Jonas goodbye and then heads back to his family home, the place he ran away from a lifetime ago to look for his identification papers. His welcome was far from warm. His mother slaps him and his father wakes up and goes on a rampage. He shows him all the papers that he has, an eviction notice and a hospital bill that breaks his heart. He tells him that they were less than parasites and that he never got him any papers when he was born before disowning him. Zane doesn't leave, however, and instead asks who was at the hospital. No one answers him, until finally his dad breaks and tells him that Sehar was gone. This makes Zain snap, and he goes to the kitchen to grab a knife. Carrying the knife, he sprints to Assad's place with his parents chasing after him. There, in front of so many people, he stabs Assad. In the courtroom, Assad is wheeled in and asked by the judge if he is the husband of Sehar. He says that Sehar was 11 years old when they married, and the judge asks if she was even allowed to marry at such a young age, and if she even knew what marriage meant. Assad acts incredulous and says that she probably does because she was already ripe. Zain is angry at this and yells at him before being reprimanded by the judge. Assad tries to reason out that he didn't know that Sehar would die. The judge then asked how Sehar died, and it turns out that during her pregnancy, she started bleeding a lot, and they tried to admit her to the hospital but couldn't. She died at the hospital gate. Zain's lawyer asks the family why they refused to admit Sehar, and it turns out it was because she didn't have any papers. Suad then goes on a tearful and angry speech about how they had no right to judge her because none of them would ever have to go through what she went through, not even in their worst nightmare. Back in prison, just before the trial, a bunch of white missionaries go over the prison cells to sing songs to cheer them all up. Some of the ladies holler, some dance, but in the corner, we see Rahil crying as she watches her cellmates dance to the music. Zain is similarly depressed, and eventually, Zain is called over to the office. Rahil hears his name being called out and realizes with horror that if Zain was there, her son was probably abandoned somewhere. She starts breaking down as the rest of the women try to comfort her. Eventually, the two are brought over to the office where Zain describes Aspro. Sometime after Zain's arrest, his mother comes to visit him. She asks him why he hates her so much, to which he just asks her why she was there. Suad then reveals that she is pregnant. Zain is noticeably heartbroken. She says that she hopes it would be a girl, and she will name her Sehar. And Zain, appalled by his mother's lack of remorse for his sister's death, angrily leaves and tells her that she was heartless. A little while later, he and his cellmates watch a program regarding injustices against children, where the host gives out a number for people to call. Zain calls the number from the prison and he publicly complains against his parents. The entire prison hears Zain's voice on television and starts cheering him on as he gives a public address. He says that he wants all adults that cannot take care of children to not have any. He tells them how difficult life was, and that he thought that they would all become good people appreciated by all. But God doesn't want that for them. This public address leads his lawyer towards his direction, who helps him make his case in court. Back in the present, the judge asks Zain what he wants from his parents, and he tells them that he doesn't want them to have any more children. Meanwhile, beyond the courtroom, Aspro's operation is busted and the people he attempted to traffic is rescued, including little Jonas, who is finally reunited with his mother, Rahil. In the prison, Zain is taken to a room where he's instructed by someone to stand against a plain wall. He tells him where to stand and tells him to smile. When he does, the man says that it was a passport photo, not a death certificate. And Zain, for the first time, finally smiles.